The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the mahogany dining table as I smoothed my simple black dress and checked my reflection one final time. The Torres family estate loomed around me, all marble columns and imported Italian furniture that screamed wealth in a way that always made me feel like an intruder in my own childhood home. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Amelia Torres, and at 27, I had grown accustomed to being the family disappointment. Tonight's dinner was supposed to celebrate the 15th anniversary of Torres Manufacturing, the company my father Miguel had built from nothing into a multi-million-dollar empire. What it really celebrated was my sister Isabella's inevitable succession to the throne I had supposedly abandoned. "Amelia, mija, you made it." My mother Elena's voice carried that particular note of surprise she reserved for my appearances at family gatherings, as if my showing up was some kind of minor miracle rather than basic courtesy. She glided across the marble foyer in a designer gown that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, air kissing near my cheeks without actually making contact. "That dress is quaint. Is it vintage?" "It's 3 months old, Mummy." I forced a smile, already feeling the familiar knot forming in my stomach. "From a boutique in my neighborhood." "Oh, your neighborhood!" The slight pause spoke volumes. My modest apartment in a revitalizing area of the city might as well have been on another planet compared to the family's sprawling estate. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My sister Isabella Torres swept into the foyer like she was walking a red carpet, her emerald silk gown hugging her curves and her dark hair styled in Hollywood waves. At 31, she had perfected the art of commanding attention the moment she entered a room. "Little sister!" Isabella's voice carried false warmth that she embraced me, her Chanel perfume overwhelming. "I wasn't sure you'd make it. Don't you have some community center meeting or something tonight?" "It's a housing development planning committee," I corrected quietly, "and we moved it to tomorrow so I could be here." "How thoughtful of them to work around your schedule." Isabella's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Speaking of schedules, you should see mine this week. 3 investor meetings, a presentation to the board, and a charity gala. You know how it is when you're actually involved in the family business." I nodded, swallowing the response that wanted to escape. Isabella had held the title of Vice President of Development for 6 years, though her actual contributions remained mysteriously vague. Her meetings consisted mostly of expensive lunches where she charmed potential clients while others did the actual work. "Girls, come meet the Hendersons," my father's voice boomed across the foyer. Miguel Torres commanded respect wherever he went. Silver-haired and distinguished, with the bearing of a man who had fought for everything he owned. "They're considering a major partnership with Torres Manufacturing." I followed Isabella toward the well-dressed couple in their 50s, watching my sister transform instantly into the perfect executive daughter. Her posture straightened, her smile became genuine, and her voice took on the confident tone of someone born to lead. "Mr. and Mrs. Henderson, what a pleasure." Isabella extended her hand with practiced grace. "Isabella Torres, Vice President of Development. I have been looking forward to discussing the expansion opportunities your company represents. And this is my younger daughter, Amelia." My father added, almost as an afterthought, She works in community development." The way he said it made my career sound like a hobby rather than the meaningful work I'd spent 5 years building. I shook hands with the Hendersons, noting how their attention immediately shifted back to Isabella when she began discussing market projections and growth strategies. "Amelia chose a different path," Isabella explained, with what sounded like sympathy but felt like condescension. "She's always been more interested in helping people than building businesses. Very admirable, really." Mrs. Henderson smiled politely. "That's nice that you can afford to follow your passion." The implication hung in the air, that my work was possible only because I had family money to fall back on. What they didn't know was that I hadn't taken a cent from my parents since college. Every dollar I earned came from my own efforts, my own networking, my own carefully cultivated relationships in the development world. "Dinner is served," announced Maria, our longtime housekeeper, appearing in the doorway with impeccable timing. The dining room sparkled under another crystal chandelier, the long tables set with china that had been in Elena's family for generations. Fresh flowers from the estate's garden created elegant centerpieces, and wine glasses caught the light like jewels. It was the kind of setting designed to impress, and from the Hendersons' appreciative murmurs, it was working. I found myself seated between my Aunt Rosa, my mother's sister, who never met a piece of gossip she didn't love, and my cousin Marisol, who had always been caught between family loyalty and genuine affection for me. "Amelia, darling," Aunt Rosa began, before we'd even touched our salads, "when are you going to find yourself a nice man? A woman your age shouldn't be living alone in that transitional neighborhood." "It's actually become quite desirable," I replied calmly. "Property values have increased 40% since I moved in." "But surely you'd prefer something more established?" Rosa's eyes flicked meaningfully toward Isabella, who was holding court at the head of the table, regaling the Hendersons with her latest business triumphs. Marisol squeezed my hand under the table, a small gesture of support that I appreciated more than she knew. At 25, she was caught between admiring Isabella's confidence and recognizing the cruelty that often accompanied it. "I like where I live," I said simply. "It's real, the people there work hard and care about their community."
"How refreshing," Aunt Rosa replied, in a tone that suggested she found it anything but refreshing. "Though I suppose it's easier to be idealistic when you don't have real responsibilities." Before I could respond, my father stood at the head of the table, wineglass in hand. "I'd like to propose a toast," he announced, his voice carrying easily across the room. 15 years ago, I started Torres Manufacturing with nothing but a vision and determination. Tonight, we celebrate not just the company's success, but its future." His gaze settled on Isabella, who glowed under his attention. "To my daughter Isabella, who has shown the dedication and business acumen to carry on the Torres legacy. In 3 months, she'll officially take over as president and CEO." The announcement hit me like a physical blow, though I tried to keep my expression neutral. I had known this was coming, had known it for years, but hearing it officially declared still stung. Around the table, glasses clinked and congratulations flowed, but I felt oddly disconnected from the celebration. "Congratulations, Isabella," I managed to say when the initial excitement died down. "Thank you, little sister." Isabella's smile was triumphant. "I know this isn't the path you chose, but I hope you'll still support the family business from wherever you are." The casual dismissal in her tone sparked something dangerous in my chest, but I simply nodded and took a sip of wine. Let her have her moment. Some revelations were worth waiting for. After dinner, the family gathered in the library, a room lined floor to ceiling with leather-bound books that were more for show than reading. The Hendersons had been escorted to the terrace for coffee and brandy, leaving just the family for what had become an uncomfortable tradition, Isabella's impromptu business presentations. "I've been working on some exciting new projects," Isabella announced, moving to stand beside the fireplace like she was addressing a board meeting. "The Henderson partnership is just the beginning. I have plans to expand Torres Manufacturing into 3 new markets within the next 2 years." She gestured grandly, and I noticed how the firelight caught the diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist, a gift from our parents for her last birthday. Everything about Isabella sparkled, from her jewelry to her confidence to the way our parents hung on every word. "The key," she continued, "is understanding that business is about more than just manufacturing. It's about vision, connections, and the ability to see opportunities that others miss." Her gaze found mine across the room. Some people are content with small-scale thinking. Community centers and affordable housing projects have their place, I suppose, but real success requires thinking bigger. Amelia's work is important too, Marisol interjected quietly. But Isabella steamrolled right over her. Of course it is, in its own way, but let's be honest. Anyone can organize community meetings and fill out grant applications. Building a multi-million-dollar company? That takes a special kind of vision. My father nodded approvingly. Isabella understands what it means to think strategically, to see the big picture. Exactly, Poppy. Isabella's smile grew wider, which is why I've been wondering if maybe it's time for Amelia to consider alternatives. The room went quiet, except for the crackling of the fire. I felt everyone's attention shift to me, waiting for my response to whatever Isabella was building towards. What kind of alternatives? I asked carefully. Well, you're 27 now. Most people your age are settling down, starting families. Maybe it's time to think about whether this community work phase of your life has run its course. Isabella's tone was sweet, almost sisterly, but her words cut deep. I mean, how long can you realistically keep playing with other people's housing projects? Wouldn't you rather focus on building something real? A marriage, children, a life that actually matters? My mother shifted uncomfortably in her chair, but she didn't speak up. My father studied his brandy sniffer as if it held the secrets of the universe. Only Marisol looked directly at me, her eyes full of sympathy and growing anger on my behalf. I do matter, I said quietly. To the families who now have safe, affordable places to live, to the communities that are being revitalized instead of gentrified. That's very noble, Isabella replied, with her condescension now barely concealed. But nobility doesn't pay the bills. Nobility doesn't build legacy. Nobility doesn't create the kind of success that actually changes the world. She gestured around the opulent library. Look around you, Amelia. This is what real achievement looks like. This house, this company, this lifestyle, it all came from thinking bigger than community centers and grant applications. Isabella, that's enough, Aunt Rosa said sharply, though her intervention came too late. No, Tia Rosa, this needs to be said. Isabella's eyes gleamed with something that looked dangerously like malice. We all tiptoe around Amelia's feelings, but someone has to tell her the truth. She's wasting her life on projects that will never amount to anything significant. She's 27 years old, living in a tiny apartment, working for nonprofits that barely pay living wages. Meanwhile, the rest of us are building something that will last for generations. The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel heat rising in my cheeks, but I forced myself to remain calm. Years of Isabella's subtle put-downs had taught me to control my reactions, to never give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. I'm proud of my work, I said finally, my voice steady, despite the storm raging inside me. Of course you are, Isabella replied with false gentleness. And we're all very proud of you for finding something you enjoy. But enjoying something and excelling at something are two different things entirely. She turned back to our parents, effectively dismissing me from the conversation. Anyway, as I was saying about the expansion plans, but I had stopped listening. Isabella's words echoed in my mind. Real achievement. Wasting her life. Never amount to anything significant. The casual cruelty of her assessment hit harder because it was delivered in front of our entire family, none of whom had defended me. Marisol reached over and squeezed my hand again, but even her support felt distant. I was alone in this room full of family, reduced to the role of cautionary tale. The Torres daughter who had chosen poorly and was now living with the consequences. What none of them knew was that their poor little Amelia had spent the last 3 years building something they couldn't even imagine.
While they saw community development work, I had been quietly networking with investors, learning about corporate acquisitions, and studying the very industry that had made our family fortune. And tonight, sitting in their library listening to Isabella's casual humiliation, I decided it was time for the Torres family to learn exactly what their youngest daughter had been building in the shadows. I excused myself from the library under the pretense of needing air, but instead of heading to the terrace, where the Hendersons were still being entertained, I climbed the marble staircase to the second floor. My childhood bedroom had been converted into a guest room years ago, but the small office my father had used when I was younger remained largely unchanged. Settling into the leather chair behind his old desk, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I needed. Luis Mendoza answered on the second ring. "Amelia, how's the family dinner going?" "About as expected," I replied quietly, glancing toward the door to make sure I was truly alone. Isabella just finished explaining to everyone why my life is a waste of space. Luis made a disgusted sound. "Well, tomorrow's going to be very educational for her. You're sure everything is ready?" "Completely. The lawyers have triple-checked every document, the board meeting is scheduled for 10 a.m., and every voting member will be present. Victor has the paperwork sealed and ready for presentation." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of what we'd accomplished over the past 3 years. While Isabella had been playing executive and my parents had been planning her coronation, Luis and I had been quietly building relationships with Torres Manufacturing's board members, suppliers, and key investors. It had started almost by accident. My community development work had brought me into contact with Carlos Mendoza, a construction executive who happened to sit on Torres Manufacturing's board. During a casual conversation about sustainable building practices, I had mentioned some ideas for improving manufacturing efficiency that could reduce environmental impact while increasing profit margins. Carlos had been intrigued enough to introduce me to other board members who were increasingly frustrated with Isabella's lack of substance and strategic vision. What began as informal consulting sessions had evolved into something much more significant. "The irony is beautiful," Luis continued. "While she's been playing dress-up in the executive suite, you've been learning the actual business from the people who matter most, the ones who make the real decisions." I still can't believe we pulled it off. Believe it, when you walk into that boardroom tomorrow morning, you'll have the backing of 70% of the voting shares. Isabella is about to learn that family connections only go so far when you've spent years proving you don't have the competence to match your confidence. A soft knock on the door of my office made me look up. Maricel peered around the doorframe, her expression concerned. "I have to go," I told Luis quietly. "See you tomorrow." Break a leg, or better yet, break Isabella's ego. I ended the call as Maricel slipped into the room and closed the door behind her. "Are you okay?" she asked, settling into the chair across from the desk. What Isabella said down there was completely out of line. She's been saying things like that for years. Tonight was just more public than usual." "That doesn't make it right." Marisol's voice carried genuine anger. "I wanted to say something, but you know how she gets when anyone challenges her." I did know. Isabella had perfected the art of making anyone who questioned her feel small and foolish. It was easier for the family to let her have her way than to deal with the drama that came from confronting her. "She really thinks she's going to be CEO," Maricel continued. "She's been planning her first 100 days, talking about restructuring departments and bringing in her own management team." "Has she now?" Something in my tone made Maricel study my face more carefully. "Amelia, what aren't you telling me?" I looked at my cousin, really looked at her. Maricel had always been caught in the middle, trying to maintain relationships with both sides of the family while avoiding the worst of the conflicts. She deserved to know what was coming, but I also couldn't risk word getting back to Isabella before tomorrow morning. "If I tell you something, can you promise to keep it absolutely confidential until tomorrow?" Maricel's eyes widened. "Of course." Isabella isn't going to be CEO of Torres Manufacturing. "What do you mean? Tio Miguel just announced—" "My father announced his intentions, but he doesn't actually control the company anymore." The confusion on Marisol's face deepened. "I don't understand." I leaned forward, keeping my voice low. 3 years ago, Torres Manufacturing went public to fund their expansion. My father retained 40% of the shares, but the other 60% went to various investors and board members. Okay. For the past 3 years, I've been quietly building relationships with those board members and investors, consulting on projects, providing strategic advice, proving my competence in ways that Isabella never bothered to attempt. Marisol's mouth opened slightly as understanding began to dawn. Tomorrow's board meeting will officially announce my appointment as CEO of Torres Manufacturing, effective immediately. Marisol stared at me for a long moment, then broke into a grin that transformed her entire face. Oh my God, Amelia, do you realize what this means? It means everything Isabella said about my life being a waste was about to become very ironic. She's going to lose her mind. Probably, but she's also going to learn that real leadership isn't about entitlement or family connections. It's about competence, vision, and the ability to build genuine relationships based on mutual respect. A commotion from downstairs interrupted our conversation, raised voices and the sound of the front door slamming. Marisol and I exchanged glances before moving to the window that overlooked the circular driveway. Isabella stood beside her silver Mercedes, gesturing wildly as she spoke on her phone. Even from the second floor, her agitation was obvious. I wonder what that's about, Marisol murmured. My own phone buzzed with a text message from Luis. Early leak. Someone from the board called Isabella. She knows something's up. Buckle up. I showed Marisol the message and her eyes widened. What are you going to do? Before I could answer, we heard Isabella's heels clicking rapidly across the marble foyer, followed by her voice calling sharply, "Where is she? Where is Amelia?" Marisol looked at me with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. I guess you're about to find out how she handles not being in control. I stood up slowly, straightening my simple black dress and checking my reflection one final time in the window. After years of being dismissed, underestimated, and humiliated, the moment of reckoning had arrived earlier than expected. "Let's go downstairs," I said calmly. "I think it's time my sister learned exactly what I've been building while she was playing executive." Isabella's voice echoed through the marble foyer like thunder before a storm. "Amelia, get down here right now." Marisol and I descended the grand staircase to find Isabella pacing near the front entrance, her emerald dress swishing with each agitated step. Her perfectly styled hair was slightly disheveled, and her usual composed mask had slipped entirely. My parents emerged from the library, confusion etched across their faces. The Hendersons followed behind them, looking decidedly uncomfortable at witnessing what was clearly a family crisis. "Isabella, what's gotten into you?" my mother demanded, her voice sharp with embarrassment. "We have guests." "Oh, I know exactly what's gotten into me." Isabella's eyes blazed as they locked onto mine. "Care to explain the phone call I just received from Carlos Mendoza?" The mention of the board member's name sent a chill through the room. My father's expression shifted from confusion to alarm. "Carlos called you?" he asked slowly. "Why would he—" "Apparently, there's a board meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning that nobody bothered to tell us about." Isabella's voice rose with each word. "A meeting where they're planning to discuss new leadership for Torres Manufacturing." The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, but I kept my expression carefully neutral. "I don't understand," my mother said, looking between Isabella and me. "Miguel, you just announced that Isabella would be taking over as CEO." "Yes, well, it seems our dear Amelia has been busy behind the scenes. Tell them, little sister, tell them what you've been doing while we all thought you were playing with your community centers." Before I could respond, my father stepped forward, his face darkening with understanding. "Amelia, what is she talking about?" The weight of 3 generations of Torres family history pressed down on me. This was the moment I had been building toward for 3 years, but facing my family's shocked expressions, I felt the magnitude of what I was about to reveal. "I've been invited to join the board of directors of Torres Manufacturing and to serve as the new CEO." The words landed like physical blows. My mother actually stumbled backward against the marble pillar. My father's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, and finally a dawning fury that I had never seen directed at me before. "That's impossible," he said flatly. "I would have been informed of any such decision." "Actually, Poppy, you wouldn't have been." I pulled my phone from my purse and scrolled to the email I had received that morning. According to the corporate bylaws established when Torres Manufacturing went public, the board of directors has the authority to select executive leadership. Your 40% shareholding gives you significant influence, but not control. Isabella snatched the phone from my hands before I could stop her, her eyes scanning the screen rapidly. As she read, her face went pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. "This can't be legal," she whispered. "There has to be some mistake." "No mistake," I replied calmly. "The board voted unanimously based on a comprehensive review of qualifications, strategic vision, and demonstrated leadership capabilities." My father moved closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous level. "How long has this been going on?" 3 years. I met his gaze directly, refusing to show the intimidation he was clearly trying to project. "Community development work that we all thought was just a phase," my mother said weakly, sinking into one of the antique chairs that lined the foyer. "It was never a phase, Mommy. It was education, real-world experience in project management, stakeholder relations, and sustainable development practices. Everything the Torres Manufacturing Board has been looking for in new leadership." Isabella finally looked up from my phone, her expression a mixture of rage and something that looked almost like fear. "You manipulated them. You used your connections to undermine the family succession plan." "I earned their respect through competence," I corrected. "Something you might have tried if you'd spent less time playing executive and more time actually learning the business." The casual cruelty of my words, delivered in the same calm tone Isabella had used to humiliate me earlier, hit their mark. She recoiled as if I had physically struck her. "How dare you?" she breathed. "How dare you sabotage everything our family has worked for?" "I haven't sabotaged anything. I've secured the company's future with leadership that's actually qualified to run it." My father's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "Qualified? You're 27 years old with no business experience." "I have 3 years of consulting experience with the Torres Manufacturing Board, 3 years of strategic planning, market analysis, and operational improvement recommendations, 3 years of proving my capabilities while Isabella was, what was it she said earlier, playing with projects that will never amount to anything significant?" The echo of Isabella's earlier insult hung in the air like a weapon turned back on its wielder. Marisol, who had remained silent through the entire confrontation, was watching with wide eyes that held a mixture of shock and growing admiration. Victor Alvarez chose that moment to arrive, his black sedan pulling up the circular driveway with impeccable timing. Our family lawyer stepped out carrying his leather briefcase, his expression professionally neutral despite the obvious tension radiating from the group assembled in the foyer. "Good evening, everyone," Victor said calmly, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Victor, thank God you're here," my father said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "We need you to explain how this board meeting situation is possible. How can they appoint a CEO without our approval?" Victor set his briefcase down and looked around the assembled family members. His gaze lingered on the Hendersons, who were clearly wishing they could disappear. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation privately," he suggested diplomatically. "No," Isabella snapped. "I want this resolved right now. I want to know how my own sister conspired to steal my inheritance." Victor sighed softly. "Very well. When Torres Manufacturing incorporated as a publicly traded company 3 years ago, the corporate structure changed significantly. Miguel, you retained 40% ownership, but the remaining 60% was distributed among various investors and board members. This structure gives the board considerable autonomy in executive decisions. But surely there's some sort of family provision," my mother began. "There is not," Victor replied firmly. "The board operates on principles of corporate governance, not family succession. Their primary obligation is to the shareholders and the long-term success of the company." He turned to address me directly. Amelia, the board has asked me to present you with the formal offer letter and employment contract. Victor opened his briefcase and withdrew a thick document bound in navy blue leather. The Torres Manufacturing logo was embossed in gold on the cover, and I could see my name printed underneath it in elegant script. "This can't be happening," Isabella said, her voice cracking slightly. "I've been preparing for this position my entire life." "Have you?" The question came from Marisol, who finally found her voice. "Because from where I've been watching, you've been coasting on the assumption that the job was yours by birthright." Isabella whirled to face our cousin. "Stay out of this, Marisol. This is between me and my sister." "Actually, it's between the board of directors and the most qualified candidate, which, according to their unanimous vote, is me." My father's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "Betrayal, Amelia. Pure and simple. You've betrayed your own family." "I haven't sabotaged anything. I've secured the company's future with leadership that's actually qualified to run it." The words came out harder than I had intended, but 3 years of careful planning and tonight's humiliation had worn away my patience for diplomatic language. Isabella's composure finally cracked completely. "You think you're so smart, don't you? You think you can just waltz in here and take everything I've worked for? I think I can lead Torres Manufacturing into sustainable growth while maintaining the values that made this company successful in the first place." I accepted the contract from Victor, feeling its weight in my hands. "And tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., I'll begin doing exactly that." My father looked between Isabella and me, his expression pained. "There has to be some way to resolve this within the family." "There is," I replied calmly. "Isabella can interview for a position within the new organizational structure, just like any other candidate. If she can demonstrate actual qualifications and a willingness to learn, there will be opportunities for her." The suggestion hit Isabella like a slap. "Interview? You want me to interview for a job in my own family's company?" "It stopped being your family's company the day it went public. Now it's a publicly traded corporation with responsibilities to shareholders, employees, and the community. Personal feelings and family dynamics don't factor into business decisions."
Victor cleared his throat diplomatically. "If I may suggest, this is a conversation that would benefit from some time and reflection. The transition doesn't need to be antagonistic." But Isabella was beyond rational discussion. Her face was flushed with humiliation and rage, and I could see her struggling between the desire to continue fighting and the growing realization that she had already lost. "This isn't over," she said finally, her voice low and dangerous. "I'll find a way to contest this. I'll prove that you manipulated the board, that you used family connections." "Go ahead," I replied calmly. The board's decision was based on 3 years of documented performance, strategic recommendations, and proven results. Any investigation will only reinforce their choice. The certainty in my voice seemed to deflate some of Isabella's remaining fight. She looked around the foyer as if seeing it for the first time. The marble columns, the crystal chandelier, the imported furniture that had always represented security and status in her mind. "You've destroyed everything," she whispered. "No," I replied softly. "I've saved it." The Hendersons made their escape shortly after Victor's arrival, murmuring polite excuses about early morning meetings while clearly eager to distance themselves from the family drama. I couldn't blame them. What they had witnessed was the complete implosion of the Torres family dynamic they had been invited to observe. After they left, an uncomfortable silence settled over the foyer. My parents sat heavily in the antique chairs, looking older than I had ever seen them. Isabella stood near the window, staring out at the circular driveway, as if contemplating her escape route. "So, what happens now?" my mother asked, finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I looked down at the contract in my hands, feeling the weight of responsibility it represented. Now, I learned to be a CEO, and the Torres family learns to function as a modern corporation rather than a feudal kingdom. "You don't understand the pressure," my father said, his earlier anger replaced by something that looked almost like grief. Building this company nearly destroyed me twice. The stress, the responsibility, the constant decision-making. I understand it better than you think, puppy. My community development work taught me about managing budgets, dealing with regulations, coordinating multiple stakeholders, and making decisions that affect people's lives. It's not that different from running a manufacturing company, just on a smaller scale. But Isabella has been preparing. Isabella has been pretending to prepare. The harsh truth hung between us like a challenge. She's held a title and attended meetings, but she's never taken real responsibility for anything. Every major decision has been reviewed and often revised by the board because her judgment has proven unreliable. Victor, who had remained diplomatically silent during the family confrontation, finally spoke up. If I may, Miguel, the board's concerns about succession planning have been growing for some time. Isabella's appointment would have required significant oversight and support systems that ultimately undermined the autonomy the position requires. My father looked at Victor with something approaching betrayal. You knew about this. You knew they were considering Amelia. I knew the board was evaluating all options for company leadership, Victor replied carefully. My obligation was to ensure any transition occurred legally and in the best interests of the corporation. Isabella finally turned away from the window, her composure somewhat restored, but her eyes still bright with unshed tears. And what about my interests? What about the fact that I've structured my entire life around taking over this company? Then maybe it's time to structure your life around something you're actually good at, I replied, not unkindly. You're intelligent, Isabella. You're charismatic and well-connected. There are plenty of paths that would suit your talents better than manufacturing operations. Like what? The question came out bitter and defeated. Public relations, marketing, event management, client relations. I ticked off the possibilities on my fingers. All areas where your natural abilities would be assets rather than liabilities. You want me to work for you. The statement hung in the air like an accusation, but I heard the underlying question beneath it. I want you to work for Torres Manufacturing in whatever capacity makes the most sense for your skills and the company's needs, whether that's under my leadership or elsewhere in the industry. Marisol, who had been quietly observing the entire exchange, finally spoke up. Isabella, you have to admit that Amelia has earned this. She didn't steal anything. She proved herself capable when you were too busy enjoying the perks of your position to actually learn how to do the job. Whose side are you on? I'm on the side of honesty, and honestly, watching you humiliate Amelia earlier tonight was disgusting. She's been nothing but supportive of this family, while you've treated her like an embarrassment. The truth of Marisol's words seemed to hit Isabella like a physical blow. She looked around the foyer as if seeing the family dynamics clearly for the first time. I need some air, she said finally, heading toward the terrace doors. As Isabella disappeared outside, my mother reached over and took my hand. I owe you an apology, mija. We all do. You don't. Yes, I do. Her voice was firm despite the tears in her eyes. We dismissed your work, your intelligence, your capabilities. We assumed that because you chose a different path, it was somehow a lesser path. We were wrong. My father remained silent, but I could see him processing everything that had transpired. The man who had built Torres Manufacturing from nothing was grappling with the reality that his succession plan had been based on assumption rather than merit. The company will be in good hands, Victor said quietly, closing his briefcase. The board's confidence in Amelia is well-founded. As Victor prepared to leave, I realized that my life was about to change completely. Tomorrow, I would walk into the Torres Manufacturing headquarters not as the disappointing younger daughter, but as the CEO. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying.
There's one more thing, I said, standing up and smoothing my simple black dress. I want to be clear that this isn't about revenge or proving a point. It's about ensuring that Torres Manufacturing continues to thrive and grow responsibly. If we can't separate family dynamics from business decisions, then we'll all fail together. Through the terrace windows, I could see Isabella's silhouette against the evening sky. She stood alone, probably contemplating a future that looked nothing like the one she had planned. Despite everything, I felt a pang of sympathy for my sister. Her humiliation tonight had been complete and public, just as mine had been earlier. But sometimes the most necessary changes are also the most painful ones, and sometimes the people who seem weakest turn out to be stronger than anyone imagined. 3 weeks later, I stood in the executive elevator of the Torres Manufacturing headquarters, watching the floor numbers climb toward the 20th floor. The building's sleek glass exterior reflected the early morning sunlight, and from my position in the elevator, I could see the city sprawling below, a landscape of opportunity and responsibility that now fell under my stewardship. The elevator chimed softly as it reached the executive floor, and the doors slid open to reveal a hallway I had walked many times before, but never as the person in charge. The plush carpeting, mahogany paneled walls, and oil paintings of the company's history seemed to regard me with new respect, or perhaps that was simply my changed perspective. "Good morning, Ms. Torres." Sarah Martinez, my new executive assistant, appeared at my side with practiced efficiency. At 45, she had worked for the company for over a decade, most recently supporting the previous CEO before his retirement. Her professionalism was exactly what I needed as I navigated this transition. "Good morning, Sarah. Is the senior management team ready for our 9 o'clock meeting?" "They're assembled in the large conference room. I've prepared the agenda packets you requested, and coffee service is ready." She paused slightly. "There's also a delivery waiting in your office." We walked toward the corner office that had been my father's domain for 15 years before the company went public. The nameplate beside the heavy oak door now read, "Amelia Torres, Chief Executive Officer," in elegant brass lettering. Even after 3 weeks, seeing my name there sent a thrill of accomplishment through me. Inside the spacious office, floor-to-ceiling windows provided a panoramic view of the city. The furniture was a blend of modern efficiency and classic elegance, a mahogany desk that could seat 8 for informal meetings, leather chairs arranged around a coffee table, and built-in bookshelves lined with industry publications and business texts. On my desk sat a large arrangement of white orchids with a card attached. I opened it to find my mother's elegant handwriting. "Mija, your father and I are proud of what you've accomplished. We should have seen your strength years ago. Love, Mommy." The gesture meant more than I could have expected. These past 3 weeks had been a delicate process of rebuilding family relationships while establishing my authority within the company. My parents had struggled initially with the complete reversal of their succession plans, but gradually they had begun to see the logic and necessity of the board's decision. "The management team is waiting," Sarah reminded me gently. I straightened my navy blue blazer and gathered the presentation materials I had prepared over the weekend. Today would set the tone for my leadership, and I was determined to prove that the board's confidence in me was justified. The conference room was imposing, with a long glass table surrounded by leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows provided another stunning view of the city, and the walls displayed charts tracking the company's performance over the past decade. 12 senior managers were seated around the table, their expressions ranging from curious to skeptical. "Good morning, everyone." I took my place at the head of the table, feeling the weight of their attention. I know this transition has been unexpected for many of you, and I appreciate your patience as we move forward together. Robert Chen, the Chief Financial Officer, leaned forward slightly. "We're all eager to hear your vision for the company's direction." I activated the large screen at the front of the room and began my presentation. Torres Manufacturing has built its reputation on quality, reliability, and innovation. Over the next 5 years, I want to expand that foundation to include sustainability and community impact as core business drivers. The first slide showed environmental impact statistics and regulatory trends in manufacturing. Sustainable practices aren't just good for the environment, they're good for business. Companies that adapt early to environmental regulations gain competitive advantages and attract increasingly conscious consumers. Maria Rodriguez, the head of operations, raised her hand. "What kind of changes are we talking about, specifically?" Phase 1 involves retrofitting our 3 main facilities with energy-efficient systems and waste reduction processes. The initial investment will be significant, but the long-term savings and tax incentives will more than offset the costs within 18 months. I clicked to the next slide, which detailed the financial projections Luis and I had developed over months of careful analysis. Phase 2 focuses on product innovation, developing manufacturing solutions that help our clients reduce their own environmental impact while maintaining efficiency and cost effectiveness. The room was quiet as the managers absorbed the comprehensive plan I was presenting. These weren't vague environmental talking points, but detailed strategic initiatives backed by solid financial analysis. "This is ambitious," said James Miller, the head of sales. "Our current client base is pretty traditional. How do we know they'll embrace these changes?" "Because I've already tested the concept." I clicked to a slide showing preliminary client feedback. Over the past 6 months, I've been conducting informal surveys with our top 20 clients about their interest in sustainable manufacturing solutions. 85% expressed strong interest, and 40% said they would pay a premium for verified environmentally responsible products. David Park, the head of research and development, looked intrigued. "You've been conducting market research for 6 months?" "I've been preparing for this role for 3 years. Every recommendation I'm making is based on extensive research and analysis." The presentation continued for another hour, covering everything from supply chain optimization to employee development programs. By the time I finished, the initial skepticism in the room had transformed into something approaching enthusiasm. "Questions?" I asked, setting down my presentation remote. Robert raised his hand again. "This is clearly a well-thought-out plan. My question is about implementation timeline. You're talking about major changes across multiple departments simultaneously." "Which is why we're going to implement in carefully planned phases," I replied. "I'm not interested in disrupting operations or overwhelming our teams. This is a 3-year plan with built-in flexibility to adjust based on results and feedback." Maria nodded approvingly. I have to admit, I was worried about inexperience, but this level of planning suggests otherwise. "I appreciate your honesty, Maria, and you're right to be concerned about experience. I haven't held an executive position before, which is why I'm counting on all of you to help me learn the aspects of leadership that can only be gained through practice." The admission seemed to resonate with the group. Rather than projecting false confidence, I was acknowledging my limitations while demonstrating my competence. "One more thing," I said, as the meeting began to wind down. "I know some of you may have concerns about working for someone who's younger or less experienced than you are. I want to address that directly. I'm not here because of family connections or political maneuvering. I'm here because the board of directors believes I can lead this company successfully, but I can only succeed with your support and expertise." James smiled slightly. "It's refreshing to hear a CEO admit they don't know everything. If I pretended to know everything, I'd be making the same mistake as my predecessor," I replied, earning a few chuckles from around the table. After the meeting ended and the managers filed out, Sarah appeared with my schedule for the rest of the day. "Your 10:30 with the Henderson Group is confirmed, and your father called to see if you could join him for lunch." "Please confirm lunch with my father," I said, settling behind my desk to review the Henderson contract. "And Sarah, that meeting went better than I expected." "You were well prepared," she replied, with professional approval. "The team respects competence more than anything else." As I dove into the Henderson contract review, I couldn't help but think about Isabella. She hadn't spoken to me since the night of the family dinner, and according to Marisol, she was still struggling to accept the new reality. Part of me hoped she would eventually see this as an opportunity rather than a betrayal, but I knew that would take time.
I used my consulting relationship to prove my competence. You had the same opportunity to build relationships with board members, to demonstrate strategic thinking, to show leadership capabilities. You chose not to. "I chose not to because I thought my position was secure." The words burst out of her with painful honesty. "I thought being family meant something." "Being family means we want what's best for each other," I replied gently. "What's best for you isn't running a company you're not qualified to lead." Isabella's carefully constructed facade finally cracked completely. "Do you have any idea what this has done to me? I've spent my entire adult life preparing for this role. My identity, my relationships, my future, everything was built around becoming CEO of Torres Manufacturing."
For the first time since this whole ordeal began, I felt genuine sympathy for my sister. I know this is difficult. No, you don't know. She stood abruptly, moving to the window that overlooked the city. You have no idea what it's like to have your entire life's purpose stripped away in a single evening. You're right. I don't know exactly what that feels like. But I do know what it's like to be dismissed and underestimated for years while watching someone else receive credit for your ideas. Isabella turned back to face me. What do you mean? I opened my desk drawer and pulled out a thick folder. Remember the Reynolds development proposal you presented last year? The one that earned you so much praise from the board? Of course. You never asked where the final revisions came from, the ones that turned your initial draft into something actually viable. I slid the folder across the desk. Those were my suggestions incorporated by the board after they reviewed my analysis of your original proposal. Isabella opened the folder, her eyes scanning pages of detailed notes and recommendations in my handwriting. Her face went pale as she recognized the scope of the changes. This isn't the only project, I continued, removing additional folders from my drawer. The Henderson Partnership, the Chicago Expansion, the Supply Chain Optimization Initiative, all of them were significantly revised based on my recommendations before final approval. But how? When? Isabella's voice was barely a whisper. The board has been sending the proposals for review for 2 years. They would present your initial work, I would provide analysis and suggestions, and they would incorporate the changes before final implementation. Isabella sank back into her chair, the weight of revelation clearly overwhelming her. They've been using you to fix my work. They've been using me to ensure the company's success, which is exactly what a board of directors should do. The silence that followed was heavy with years of misunderstanding and missed opportunities. Isabella stared at the folders on my desk as if they represented the collapse of everything she thought she knew about herself. I could have learned, she said finally. If someone had told me my work needed improvement, I could have gotten better. Could you have? I asked gently. Because from what I observed, you were more interested in the prestige of the position than the actual work required. Isabella's shoulders sagged with defeat. You're right. I loved the idea of being CEO more than I loved the actual business. It was the first honest thing she had said to me in years, and it opened a door I hadn't expected. It's not too late to find something you do love, I said. You're intelligent and capable, Isabella. You just need to find the right application for your talents. Like what? What am I supposed to do now that my entire life plan has been destroyed? I leaned forward, choosing my words carefully. What parts of your work did you actually enjoy? Not the title or the prestige, but the actual tasks. Isabella considered the question. I liked the client meetings, building relationships, presenting ideas, convincing people to see possibilities they hadn't considered before. Those are valuable skills. Marketing, public relations, business development, there are entire industries built around those capabilities. You're offering me a consolation prize? I'm offering you a chance to build a career around your actual strengths instead of trying to force yourself into a role that doesn't suit you. For the first time since entering my office, Isabella looked directly at me without anger in her eyes. And what if I wanted to stay at Torres Manufacturing in some capacity? Then we would need to have honest conversations about what role makes sense, what you would need to learn, and what kind of performance standards you would be held to. No special treatment because I'm the founder's daughter. No special treatment because you're the founder's daughter. Isabella was quiet for a long moment, processing the fundamental shift in our relationship and her place within the business family. When she finally spoke, her voice was steadier than it had been all afternoon. I need time to think about this, about what I want my life to look like if it's not what I always planned. Take all the time you need. And Isabella, for what it's worth, I never wanted to hurt you. I just wanted to prove that I was capable of more than anyone believed. I know, she said softly, and I'm beginning to understand that maybe what I believed about myself wasn't entirely accurate either. 2 months later, the Torres family gathered for Sunday dinner at the estate for the first time since the night everything changed. The dining room looked exactly the same, crystal chandelier, imported china, fresh flowers from the garden, but the dynamics around the table had shifted fundamentally.
Isabella sat across from me, looking more relaxed than I had seen her in years. After weeks of soul-searching, she had decided to take a position with a boutique marketing firm that specialized in corporate communications. The role played to her strengths in relationship building and presentation, while allowing her to learn new skills without the pressure of family expectations. The Henderson Group project is exceeding all projections, I was telling my parents as Maria served the first course. Their willingness to embrace sustainable manufacturing practices has made them a showcase client for our new initiatives.
And the other manufacturers in their network are taking notice, my father added with obvious pride. Carlos Mendoza tells me we're getting inquiries from companies that weren't even on our radar 6 months ago. My mother smiled warmly. It's wonderful to see the company growing in such a positive direction. Speaking of positive directions, Isabella interjected, I have some news. Morrison & Associates offered me a promotion to senior account executive. I'll be leading their team on a campaign for a major construction company. The announcement was met with genuine enthusiasm from around the table. Watching Isabella talk about her new career, I could see a confidence in her that had been missing when she was trying to force herself into the CEO role. I'm proud of you, I said, meaning it completely. You found something that actually suits you. I'm learning that there's a difference between what you think you want and what actually makes you happy. The pressure of living up to expectations I set for myself was suffocating. Marisol, who had been quietly observing the family dynamics, finally spoke up. It's amazing how much happier everyone seems when they're not trying to be something they're not. Speaking of happiness, my mother said, her eyes twinkling with mischief, Amelia, that young man, Luis, has been calling the house asking about you. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. Luis is my business partner, Mommy. We're working on some new development projects together. Business partner who sends you flowers and asks your father's permission to take you to dinner, Isabella said with the first genuine smile I had seen from her in months. He asked Poppy's permission? I looked at my father, who was trying unsuccessfully to hide his amusement. He's very respectful. He clearly understands the value of building strong family relationships. Oh my God, I muttered. But I couldn't suppress my own smile. Louise had been a constant source of support throughout the entire transition, and I had to admit that our relationship had been evolving beyond mere business partnership. When do we get to meet him properly? My mother asked, as your young man rather than your business associate. Soon, I promised, realizing that I was actually looking forward to bringing Luis into the family circle. After years of feeling like an outsider at these gatherings, the prospect of sharing this space with someone who understood and supported my goals felt surprisingly appealing. I think it's wonderful, Isabella said. You deserve someone who appreciates what you've accomplished. The comment, coming from my sister, meant more than she probably realized. For most of our lives, Isabella had been threatened by my intelligence and competence. To hear her acknowledge my success with genuine warmth felt like the final piece of our reconciliation falling into place. After dinner, Isabella and I found ourselves alone on the terrace where she had retreated the night of the dramatic family meeting. The garden was peaceful in the evening light, and the city sparkled in the distance. I owe you an apology, Isabella said without preamble. Not just for that night, but for years of treating you like you were less important than me. You don't... Yes, I do. Her voice was firm. I spent so much time being threatened by your intelligence and competence that I never appreciated having a sister who was actually remarkable. I looked at Isabella, really looked at her, and saw something I had missed for years. Beneath the confidence and entitlement, she had been struggling with her own insecurities and fears of inadequacy. We both made mistakes, I said. I could have been more direct about wanting to be involved in the family business instead of building my case in secret. You shouldn't have had to build a case. Your qualifications spoke for themselves. Isabella shook her head. I was so busy enjoying the assumption that I was the heir apparent that I never bothered to earn the position. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the sunset over the city that now felt like a place of opportunity rather than judgment.
Do you think we can be friends now? Isabella asked. Real friends, not just sisters who tolerate each other at family dinners. I'd like that, I replied honestly. I'd like that very much. As we headed back inside, I reflected on how dramatically everything had changed. 3 months ago, I was the family disappointment, dismissed and underestimated. Now, I was leading a successful company, building a relationship with someone who valued my ambitions, and reconnecting with family members who finally saw me for who I really was. The transformation hadn't been without pain, for Isabella especially, who had to rebuild her entire sense of identity, but it had also revealed strengths in all of us that had been hidden beneath years of assumptions and expectations. Walking back into the house with my sister beside me, I realized that sometimes the most profound victories aren't about defeating others, but about creating space for everyone to discover their true potential. 1 year later, I stood at the podium during Torres Manufacturing's annual shareholder meeting, addressing a room filled with investors, employees, and family. The company's stock price had doubled, our environmental initiatives had won 3 industry awards, and we had expanded into 2 new markets ahead of schedule. Success isn't inherited, I said, looking directly at Isabella, who sat in the front row, beaming with genuine pride. The underestimated daughter had not only saved the family legacy, she had transformed it into something greater than anyone had imagined possible.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.